activists, artists, writers, performers, students, siblings, and friends. Today's video is about this inspiring generation of changemakers, youth. Obviously, youth represents a huge demographic, and we can't possibly discuss all of the factors at play. And besides, there's a lot going on in the world today, and your mental health concerns might be different depending on your upbringing, ethnic identity, or socioeconomic status, among other things. Be sure to check out our previous videos on identity and mental health if you haven't already. And if you don't feel quite so young, don't worry. Mental health affects people of all ages, and whether or not you're between 13 and 24 or whatever else, our hope is that there is something in this video for everyone. Let's start by setting the stage. Look, if you're a young person, your everyday experience is probably very different from the older people around you. But though people have always complained about
kids these days,
maybe in today's society, something is different. Maybe the kids aren't alright. Why is that exactly? Well, it turns out that young people often experience mental illness with different symptoms and causes than adults, though that's not always the case, but you can imagine how and why. Our teenagers are incredibly important for brain development. Synapses are pruned and strengthened, and neurological connections continue to form well into our 20s. In fact, these are also the years when we are most likely to develop mental health conditions. Half of the people who do develop mental illnesses do so by age 14 and 75% by age 24. But you wouldn't necessarily know that from a typical conversation. We often hear teenage mental health issues chalked up to things like teenage angst or just teens being teens. When you hear these things all the time, it's hard to know when to seek help, and sadly, a lot of us don't. According to the World Health Organization, most cases of mental illnesses in teens go untreated or undiagnosed. But it's not just a phase. Untreated mental illness can lead to serious health problems and, worse, explain why suicide is now the second leading cause of death for young people around the world. In fact, studies show that millennials and Gen Z appear to face higher levels of mental illness than Gen Xers or baby boomers. Or at least we're more willing to talk about them. Whatever the case may be, clearly we need to be aware of how youth-related stressors can affect mental health. When we know of the situations and symptoms to look out for, we are better equipped to take care of ourselves and others. So today, we'll get started with part 1 of our youth series by focusing on some common stressors that can come from our relationships with ourselves and our peers to affect our mental health. Specifically, social media, cyberbullying, romance and rejection, adoption and foster care, and finally, college. Hello, welcome to this video. Oh, this is the intro. Millennials, and to an even larger extent, Gen Z, hardly know life without the internet. On average, we spend about 2 hours a day on social media, some of us much more than that. That's more than 5 years over a lifetime. And as you probably already know, that much time on social media has serious consequences for our mental health. Because social media is a relatively new issue, we're still figuring out all the science associated with it. One survey, in fact, suggests that social media usage could be the main driving factor behind Gen Z's apparently higher rates of mental health concerns. Let's explore some possible reasons why. For starters, most people only post about the good things that happen in their lives. Birthday parties, nights out with friends, or dates with romantic partners. It's all good things, but that can actually make us feel worse about ourselves. A lot of the times, seeing other folks living their best lives can make us feel like our own lives pale in comparison. But hey, everybody only posts what they want others to see, and what we see on Instagram is not an accurate representation of the lives of others, not by a long shot. That is particularly important to remember when it comes to our self-esteem and body image. Think about it. We post our most attractive pictures on social media. And so on balance, everyone looks better on social media than they do in real life. And it's not just that. Right now, Facetune is the #1 paid app in the photo and videos category of the App Store. And these apps can distort bodies far from their natural shapes and airbrush skin to perfection, and even do so on live video. Most of us are not trained to notice when someone has edited themselves like this, and comparing ourselves to images we believe are real can feel not so good, especially when said photo is accompanied by an ad for miracle detox tea or a diet or exercise program, suggesting if you buy this product, do this exercise, you too will become just like me. It's not real or true. Even if we know this though, it can be hard to shake that feeling that everyone else is looking good and having fun doing it without us. And that feeling of loneliness is probably most famously seen in FOMO, or fear of missing out. That's probably no surprise to you. If your feed shows people having fun, then it's easy to assume that everyone else is in on the party, except you. But look, you don't have to create some sort of FOMO for social media itself in order to fight off these feelings. By which I mean, you don't have to cut out social media completely to lessen the effects of these negative feelings when you are scrolling through online. Instead, try just reducing your consumption. A 2018 study found that limiting social media usage to just 30 minutes a day was enough to see benefits. And you can easily do this by taking advantage of existing screen time functionalities on most apps. And that way you can receive a notification once you've been on the app for a certain amount of time and give yourself a much deserved break. An important distinction here is that not all social networking sites are created equal. Some of them are worse for our mental health than others. Instagram is probably the worst from a mental health perspective for a lot of the reasons I mentioned earlier. It's the place for our most carefully curated photographs with the perfect lighting and angles, achieved after who knows how many tries and edits. We don't get much personal interaction beyond comments like "Yas Queen," and we don't get any of the behind the scenes of people's lives. By contrast, YouTube is more about in-depth interactions, though yes, you can still spiral into endless clickbait if you're not careful, but you're more likely to get some of the behind the scenes on YouTube, and people often open up more here than they do on Instagram. Because of this, YouTube has actually been ranked the best platform for mental health. So if you're feeling down after scrolling through social media for who knows how long, take a step back and think about what you're being shown and where you're being shown it. In addition to these other factors, when we spend time on social media can also be important. Studies show that using your phone right before bed can disrupt your sleep and lead to poor mental health. Consider starting a routine to put your phone away at a specific time before bed. You can try using do not disturb modes or similar functions to block access automatically. And yeah, okay, that probably seems obvious, but you and I both know the temptation of a quick Instagram check while lying on bed. So turn that into a challenge with your friends and family. Adopting healthier habits together and holding each other accountable can make things easier and more fun than doing it alone. Long story short, don't worry about deleting every single social media app for good. In moderation, social media can be a great way to stay connected with friends and join meaningful communities. Just be conscious of how much time you spend scrolling and where, and be aware that not everything you see is real. So we've established that social media can be not so bad, but in moderation, and even then, there are some unfortunate aspects that can still cling on. Cyberbullying. I am talking about cyberbullying. To clarify, cyberbullying doesn't have to happen on social media, but other methods like texting and using other apps often add on to what's already happening on social forums. So point being, if it's bullying and it's digital, it's cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is particularly distressing because it's often accompanied by physical or verbal bullying in person, yet it doesn't end when school ends. It follows you where you go, which means it can be difficult for parents or teachers to notice. So it's probably no surprise that this leads to a number of effects that range from low self-esteem and loneliness to suicidal thoughts or actions. Of course, we hope no one would ever have to experience this, but given the reality we live in, here are some steps you can take if you or a friend or loved one are impacted by cyberbullying. First, recognize that whatever is happening is not your fault. You are not responsible for other people's behaviors. You are important and valued and loved regardless of what anyone says while hiding behind a screen. Second, don't respond or retaliate to bullies. A lot of the times this makes the situation worse. I know, you deserve to stand up for yourself, but do so by fighting the bully's satisfaction. Bullies are usually looking for a reaction, so when we ignore them, they often lose interest and stop. And then we can hopefully carry on. Third, save evidence of what the bullies are doing. The thing about cyberbullying is that while it's harder to spot than in-person bullying, you do have more evidence of what's happening. So save comments, pictures, texts, everything. Having evidence to back up what you're saying can be huge when you want or need to address this problem. This is especially important when it comes to things like revenge porn, where sexually explicit media is shared online without permission, often as blackmail or to force someone to stay in a relationship. Let's be clear, this is abuse, and it's illegal in many countries. In the US, for instance, 46 states have laws against it. So having evidence will help you make your case and protect yourself from future harm. Side note though, there is a bit of nuance here in that if you are not the person in the picture, for example, but someone sends the picture to you, you should bring it to an authority figure and then delete it ASAP. Because otherwise, the fact that you have it on your phone, even though you didn't take it, can actually hurt you. So this brings us to the next step. Tell someone who is in the position to do something about the bullying. These are often people like parents, teachers, school administrators, and in some cases, law enforcement. Once you've figured out how to gather your evidence, use whatever tools you can to block the person from contacting you. Most social networking sites have this feature, so take advantage of it the best that you can. You deserve peace of mind. Now, let's say that you are not the one being targeted, but you notice someone else being bullied. Being a bystander might seem easy, but it's not enough, and it can hurt us all in the long run. So as much as it is within your capacity, help the person being hurt. We need to be actively anti-bully to stop bullying from happening in schools and online. This doesn't mean bullying the bully back, since hurt people, and that could make the cycle worse. Rather, communicate strongly to them that their behavior is unacceptable, that you and others are here to protect the ones being hurt, and that you will be reaching out to other people for support in stopping the bullying. Even if you can't be a loud advocate for those being hurt, you can still offer support by being there with them, helping them plan who to reach out to, or just being a friend who proactively reminds them that they have someone, you, to lean on. Of course, what's online is just a part of our lives. In the physical world, our relationships can play a huge role in mental health too. Meaningful relationships can help us keep going even when things feel impossible. But how do we form those connections, and what happens when they fail? For a lot of us, we become scared of making connections because we're scared of being rejected. And what a fundamentally human fear that is. I mean, evolutionarily speaking, for the vast majority of human evolution, people who are rejected from social groups or by a romantic partner would probably die. So getting rejected meant you didn't get to pass on your genes, and well, that's basically the name of the survival game. So biologically, this makes a lot of sense. Of course, it's not like we're thinking about our caveman days when someone rejects us. We're probably more stuck on the heartache that just took over our chests. But it turns out that's not something to beat yourself up over either. Though a lot of what we know about rejection comes from fairly new research, we know that it can be harmful, no matter if you've previously had mental health concerns or not. It affects all of us, so your feelings? Very valid. In fact, one study linked the pain of rejection to a cascade of emotional consequences. This included feelings of anger, anxiety, depression, jealousy, and sadness, and increased aggression. The pain of rejection was also attributed to reduced performances on difficult intellectual tasks. So when we think about our own lives, rejection can have a real impact on our ability to focus in school or work. If we add this to other mental health concerns that some of us already face, well, rejection can be a recipe for disaster. But I promise you, it's not the end of the world. If I can survive it, you can. Oof. Of course, getting over rejection, like most things, takes time. Whether you've been rejected by a romantic crush or a group of your peers, there are some things you can do to lessen the pain. Here's one tactic. If you've been rejected, make a list of all the things you didn't appreciate so much about the person or group that rejected you. Okay, it sounds petty, and it is, but thinking about this list or reading it can help you recognize the ways that, hey, maybe you were just incompatible, and help you flip the script from, why didn't they want me in their life, to, honestly, did I even need them? Of course, ultimately, we don't want to demonize people for rejecting us. This is just a first step. Now, another strategy is exercise. Exercising is good for your mental and physical health in general, so it really is worth your time to find an exercise you enjoy and do it regularly. It's also useful for getting over the pain of rejection. When we exercise, we're improving ourselves both mentally and physically, and releasing brain chemicals that will help us feel happier. There's no need to do 2-a-days and beef up like John Cena or Brie Larson. Studies show that about 20 minutes of exercise a day is enough to see good mental health benefits. Obviously, there's more to relationships and mental health than just rejection. Millions of people with mental health concerns have happy and fulfilling relationships, while many others without mental health concerns deal with relationship issues of their own. Mental health issues may be a hurdle in a romantic relationship, but they shouldn't be and are not an insurmountable obstacle. Different relationships face different struggles, and that doesn't make any of the people involved less worthy of love or effort. But hey, I get it. Sometimes it's hard to know when to tell a romantic partner about your mental illness. You might be afraid you'll be a burden, that they're better off without you. I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer to these doubts, but I've been there, and here's a bit of what I've learned. 1. You shouldn't feel pressured to tell a romantic partner about your mental health history right off the bat. But once you're in a committed relationship, that might be something to talk about. It's your story, and they should be respectful enough to at least hear you out at your own pace. 2. Remember that your partner is already with you regardless of whether you've told them about your circumstances. So if you truly want to spend your time or even your life with them, then that shouldn't change after you've told them about your mental illness, and vice versa. 3. Do give your partner the time and space to process what you've told them. This could take a while, but you really owe it to yourself to make sure that you and your partner can fully support each other in times of trouble. No matter what types of relationship we're talking about here, platonic or romantic, it's not worth negatively impacting your mental health. So ask yourself whether your relationship is healthy mentally and physically. If you find yourself answering no as you notice the way that the other side is responding to you, it might be time to break things off. Of course, relationships are complicated, regardless of whether or not they are romantic. And when it comes to our relationships with the people we call family, things can get even messier real fast. So that's our next topic for today, adoption and foster care. Like any huge life event, being adopted or placed in foster care can have a big impact on mental health. Unfortunately, current academic research on adoption is lacking, and most research that do exist focus on children who were adopted at a very young age, usually as infants. Another problem is that it's difficult to study the effects of adoption later on because there are so many factors that might go into why someone was adopted, like an abusive birth family, and all these factors could have a larger impact on their mental health than the act of being adopted itself. So because this research is so limited in many ways, please take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. As you can probably imagine, adoption affects millions of people. According to census data, more than 2 million children in the US live with adoptive parents, and another 4 million kids have at least one step-parent. And so this means that for millions of people, adoption is very real and very personal. So everyone's experience will be very different. But there are some common things when it comes to adoption and mental health. For starters, children who are adopted appear to be at higher risks for mental illnesses than children who weren't. More likely to experience symptoms of anxiety, depression, ADHD, ODD, or oppositional defiant disorder, and some attachment disorders, which can affect a person's ability to establish healthy relationships with parents or caregivers. Some of this makes sense intuitively. Learning you were put up for adoption as a child can lead to doubts about your self-worth, or bring up questions about why your birth parents didn't keep you. This can be especially the case if you were old enough to remember it. It also appears that adopted children are more likely to be in contact with mental health professionals at some point during their lives. This makes sense too. Many adoptees go through a health evaluation prior to adoption or work with social workers, or caseworkers. Besides, if adoptees are more likely to experience the mental health concerns I just mentioned, then they may also be more likely to see mental health specialists for help with those concerns. So this is probably a good thing since it allows people to get the help that they need. But still, we don't really know why adoptees are treated more often for mental health concerns. It could be that parents who adopt are of a better socioeconomic status, so they can take their kids to see mental health professionals more often. Or maybe the family goes to therapy together to work through relationship tensions. Or they are referred by social workers handling their case. Again, the research here is lacking. Research also shows that adopted children appear to have greater rates of substance abuse disorders compared to non-adoptees. This is good to keep in mind so we can make better lifestyle choices and work with medical professionals to design the right treatment and prevention programs for ourselves. I know, that's a lot. Honestly, sometimes research brings up more questions than we can answer. One thing is true though. The vast majority of adoptees, especially those adopted as infants, lead completely healthy and well-adjusted lives. So don't let these statistics or potential research findings bring you down. As with all things, it's just helpful in general to be aware of risk factors and symptoms for our various circumstances and identities so that we can get the best help possible if we need it. Foster care is a different story for a number of reasons. There's just a lot more research about the mental health of those who go through the foster care system. Now, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, about 6% of children born in the US are placed in foster care at some point between birth and their 18th birthday. And about 1% of children are in foster care in any given year. And probably unsurprisingly, there are some pretty drastic racial disparities in the system. Around 10% of African American children and as much as 15% of Native American children experience some time in foster care, for example. I highly recommend checking out our series on race and ethnicity to learn more about the systemic issues at play here. The thing is, the foster care system can come with a lot of disadvantages and abuse. All these children are serious warriors. To start with, kids are usually placed in foster care because they suffered trauma like losing parents, being abused by family, or being neglected by their caregivers. And after they're in the system, children face astonishing rates of abuse. One study estimated it to be as high as 28%, but many alumni of the foster care system believe the rate could be much higher. All of these factors come together to produce very high rates of mental health problems. Compared to kids in the general population, foster kids exhibit higher rates of PTSD, major depression, panic disorders, anxiety disorders, drugs and alcohol dependence, and eating disorders. Even good foster families might not be equipped to deal with the mental health concerns of the kids they're fostering. And the back and forth uncertainty of the foster care system isn't exactly helpful to receiving adequate and sustained treatment. Now, that's what the research tells us, but there aren't quite as many studies about solutions to those problems. So let me emphasize that this does not mean that there aren't steps we can do to take care of our mental health. Rather, it's just that it'll take some digging, but I promise you, there are systems and people out there who want and will be able to help you. You can get started by asking about your treatment options as someone in the system, finding trusted adults like teachers and social workers, and doing research of your own on different types of therapists near you who may offer affordable or even free services. Whether you were adopted or you've experienced being in foster care, remember that none of this is your fault. Burying your trauma can cause you to internalize it, and it can feel like the things that are happening are the results of your actions. But this is not true. You are a human being with inherent value and worth, and no one can ever take that away from you. And hey, you're not alone. Yes, you're the only one who can know the experiences that you've specifically been through, but millions of people have lived through similar experiences. There are support groups in person and online that could be a great choice to seek community from those who understand at least some of your lived experiences. They can serve as reminders to you of your value and your worth. And remember that always, there are truly people out there who care for you, even if it doesn't always seem like it. Things can and will get better. The world is a lot kinder than we think it is, though I know that can be really hard to believe sometimes. Part of that means you need to give kindness to yourself. Always remember that you are deserving of love, empathy, and health as much as anyone else. You've got this. So, as you navigate growing up and caregiver concerns, eventually you might get to the next big phase in life for a lot of us. College. Transitioning to college or adjusting to new schools in general can influence our mental health a lot. Luckily, most schools have at least some mental health resources for their students, though the quality and availability of those resources is questionable. But this is something to look into, especially at colleges, since 83.1% of college students with mental illnesses had their condition before stepping on campus. And the more we push off dealing with mental health concerns, the more they can build up to affect us at the most unfortunate times. So, if you know that you're living with a mental illness or you think you might be, it's worth your time to ask about mental health resources on campus tours. You can also look up a school's mental health policies online. Now, this might require some digging because schools often do a poor job of publicizing their campus mental health resources, but turning to existing student groups or forums might help you fill in those gaps. Of course, when it comes to mental health resources, not all schools are created equal. It turns out that most colleges and universities lack sufficient mental health resources for their students. At small to medium-sized schools, the ratio of certified counselors to students is about 1 to 1,000 to 2,000. At larger universities, it's closer to 1 to 2,000 to 3,500. That's one certified counselor for every 2 to 3,000 students. So sometimes you might end up on a wait list to speak with someone, and that is less than ideal. But fret not, on many campuses, other personnel exist to help you navigate your well-being, from peer supporters to residential advisors or RA. An RA is usually an upperclassman who has seen students face similar struggles as you, and they generally know the ins and outs of your specific college. So an RA can offer tips and strategies about adjusting to college life, or they can point you at least towards resources that have helped them or their friends in the past. Of course, these resources are just one small part of your mental health experience at school. The policies of the school might matter even more sometimes, and that can vary a lot depending on the campus you're on. Different schools have different approaches when it comes to leaves of absence, makeup test dates, and testing accommodations, for example. So this is where being your own best researcher and advocate comes into play. As a start, you might want to look into how the campus administration deals with medications and support animals. Especially for the animals, you usually have to get approval from your school's Office of Disability Services first before you can bring them to campus, and this can take quite a while, so it's important to start the process as early as possible. And if someone tries to deny you these rights, definitely bring up the Americans with Disabilities Act, or a similar act that might exist if you live in a different country, or heck, just the fact that you are a human being deserving of rights. Sometimes your peers might have allergies that you definitely should communicate about. That's not why we are bringing up acts like the ADA. The ADA matters more for the approval process with your teachers and administrators as you seek to make sure your needs are being met. Now, all of that is a lot, but hopefully that gives you some pointers on what to look for before committing to a school. Even if you don't feel like you need the resources right now, you might benefit from them later down the line. At the end of the day, though, sometimes a solid support structure is the best resource you can have, especially if you're far from home. So try to remember that there are other people in your class who are in the same boat as you, and especially during the first few weeks of school, take advantage of the fact that no one really knows each other yet. Make a friend or two, sit next to a stranger at dinner, build up a mutual support structure over time, and know that friend groups inevitably change. That's okay. It's not your fault, and there is no pressure to find best friends right away. College can be an isolating place no matter how many friends you have. So remember that your feelings are valid, especially if you are experiencing living on your own for the first time. And that's what it's all about, really. Youth is riddled with mental health growth spurts that coincide with big changes in our lives. It's a messy ordeal that no one navigates perfectly, and that's okay. There's a lot more to the nuance of youth mental health, but For now, we'll wrap up this long first video of our 3-part series. We hope that this video has helped provide some context and solidarity as you and I both navigate life together. Remember this: you are not alone. As hard as it might be to believe sometimes, I promise that there is always someone who is willing to listen and support you, even a stranger like me. There will be a whole video on resources and action steps at the end of the series, but for now, look in the description for a list of things you can check out if you'd like to learn more or seek help. Check out our other videos on race and mental health, and stay tuned for part 2, where we'll touch on external issues that can affect youth mental health, like climate change, gun violence, video games, and more. See you then!